Hello and welcome to another World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor preview. This time we're going to be talking about garrisons, and this video is coming off the back of a recent Artcraft post on the official forums. Basically they went into a lot of detail about various things. It's all very interesting, and I'm going to cover the whole damn lot of it. Now this preview is mainly focused on art, and then some of the interplay between the art and the game's design. Overall, it's basically about the feel of the Garrison feature, and how the art team is trying to bring that into life. We also have a preview of a lot of the art assets, mainly for the Alliance version, but at the end we will have a bit of a sneak peek at the Horde stables, which look really awesome. Now this video is going to be split into three sections. First of all, I will cover the actual Artcraft post, what the Blizzard employee said. Then I will talk specifically about the screenshots we were shown, one by one, and just give you a lowdown on some of the nicer features and things like that. And then finally, I'm going to give my thoughts on the post as a whole, and then garrisons in general. So without further ado, let's get into the post itself. First of all, we just have an opening few words from Corey Stockton, who is the lead content designer for World of Warcraft. Overall, a very important guy. He did emphasize basically that this is a massive new feature, but one of the key things that they want to do is still keep it grounded within a familiar aesthetic. Basically, it's supposed to feel like we're bringing a piece of home with us, albeit it's going to be a far more epic bit of home than what we may be used to. He did mention one or two things. He said that one of the major challenges is actually the plot system, and in case you're not aware, the plot system is basically that your garrison will have a number of plots. I think it starts off being something like 5, then 7, then like 13, something similar to that. But you can have complete customizability in where your buildings are placed. Now, that does lead to one or two issues with design, and it is very modular, so this means that individual buildings cannot change the overall layout and shape of the design. Overall, look, he did say that it's not really a problem, and he's quite confident that the team has managed to basically just have a good way of doing it. Overall though, this does sound pretty good, and I think that there's a bit of an opportunity here to use subtle orientations of the buildings, which could be perhaps automatic or maybe player controlled, in a bit of a cool way so they can make the garrison look very cohesive. Just as an example, having all your buildings facing the right direction, and various things like that, basically so it doesn't look hodgepodge. I think they will, of course, nail this completely. But yeah, it was an interesting note to start the thing off with, so yeah, whatever Corey, that's pretty cool. Of course, as these buildings level up, they get larger and larger and larger, so another design issue is how do they just make it feel right? The different sizes of the buildings and how they all work. Then of course it all has to be under one very cohesive art style. It's not like the level 1 and 3 buildings can look absurdly completely different stylistically. So yeah, as an art team they basically just needed to make one large cohesive set of art which fits across multiple upgrade levels. It also needs to fit across multiple different plot variations and the different layouts the players can actually have for the garrisons. And if they pull this off, which I'm honestly quite confident that they will, it will work very, very well. So, now that we have Corey's little opening thing sort of covered, let's move on to the actual main talk from the artists, the people who are basically making this come to life. And the first person who we go to is Wendy Vetter, and she is the lead content dungeon artist. So, if there's a new dungeon, then she's probably had her hand in it somewhere. And essentially, the main theme that they had starting was a trip down memory lane. This was just a core design ideal, especially for the example of humans, considering the Elwyn and Redridge aesthetics. Then, of course, looking at the Horde stable, it would certainly appear as if it is going to be more of an updated version of the classic Durotar. I'd certainly prefer classic Durotar over perhaps Iron Horde Cataclysm versions of the Orc aesthetic. Now, they did initially start working on the different buildings by basically updating the old textures, making new ones, and then trying to just tweak the buildings a little bit. Basically, it was keeping similar silhouettes and that kind of thing, but the team noticed that they look better, sure, but they were just too familiar. It was not new enough to really look truly epic and be impressive. So, Wendy said that upon realizing this, they decided to update the design to extra crispy. Interesting phrase for describing buildings, really I personally associate it with delicious bacon. But anyway, extra crispy is great in the sense of bacon, and apparently it's also great in the sense of buildings because it meant going beyond the simple idea of polishing the older variants. No, these new ones, they have more character, but of course, while they are making new things, they are still building them upon the past, keeping the original spirit but exploring new designs. They created fresh silhouettes, and then they started focusing on just pushing the individuality of the various buildings, essentially focusing on making the upgrades look fantastic. She gave the example of the lumber mill, and initially it will start just being, well, really an oversized crate with some sticks and a dull saw, and actually it looks really nice. It has a lot of character to it, but as we go on, the upgrades ramp up and up and up, so visually the scale is getting higher and it's looking more epic, but it is still keeping the same core charm of the original, and I think that's a real challenge. Often when various just art sort of things try to dial up the epic and become more and more and more and bigger, they lose charm. But honestly, looking at these different bits of art, it certainly seems like they have kept the charm level, and that really does make me quite happy. Next, she showed us the Mage Tower, and actually I think this thing looks absolutely fantastic. Basically, she said that they actually use these like little short stories that they kind of come up with, like the idea of, I don't know, snuggling in beside a crackling hearth reading a spell book. And they take a sort of story like that and then try to build that into an aesthetic, and then via art and props and various little sort of character-based quirks to different buildings, they end up with a building that is fantastically detailed and full of character. I mean, just look at the internal image for the library and compare that to what we have in game at the minute. It just looks great. I'm really impressed with that. Really, this post has just filled me with a lot of confidence in their art team, and yeah, well, you know what, I'll get into my own thoughts later on in the video. Let's just keep it rolling with the post. So next up we have the prop team, and specifically the lead prop artist Eric Browning. Now, in case you're not sure what a prop is essentially one of the smaller elements that you will see. Things like adornments and then the special effects that go with them. And of course, the main aim of an art team is to tell a story, or reinforce a current one through the worlds that they recreate. Well, that they create, because really they're not really recreating anything. This is very important for the prop team, since they are responsible for putting in many of the little fine, minor details that you maybe don't notice the individual ones, but on the whole, they are what add a very important level of polish to the world. Basically, the smaller nuances that will together become a very effective whole. Really, the main goal of this team in relation to Garrisons was to make the place feel very alive and give it a great sense of purpose. They wanted to ensure that the buildings had plenty of high quality props that made sense within the context of the given building. Now, often games developers will simply just make a few items and then replace it many times. Now, you've seen that in old World of Warcraft. There's many little props and things that are just really strewn about all over the place, and when you're making a giant world like World of Warcraft, that's fine. But with something so up close and personal as a Garrison, it does seem like this would be overly noticeable if every single building had lots of repeated art assets and things like that. So, the good news is they're going for a very bespoke treatment. Every single building is going to have its own unique props and things like that. Now, another very good example was given by one of the senior artists, Jay Huang, and this was with profession hubs. So they're going to be full of, the hubs themselves that is, are going to be full of little profession-specific details that tie in well with the game's main races. So in the case of, say, a jewel crafting building, that's going to have some Draenor flavour to it. The blacksmiths will be full of just dwarven sort of architecture and feel, and then if we were to, say, take enchanting, that will have lots of blood elf and high elf hints to it. And tying things like the relevant races in certainly does add quite a bit of flavour. It's also very important that everything doesn't look 100% human alliance, so having hints of other races is very important, and of course the Horde will have the same treatment with their own buildings. Now perhaps I think it would be nice if, say, followers will have maybe racial bonuses to crafting skills, so it would look quite well if you had a Draenor follower working inside a Draenor themed jewel crafting building. Overall, that's just nice and cohesive in my opinion, so overall very good. And then finally, the end of the post, they showed us a quick look at the Horde stable. We'll get a full preview of the Horde side of things soon. It does seem like they're a bit further on with the Alliance one, but overall, I think the Horde stable looks really nice, it's chock full of character, and it's a good blend of aesthetics. But let's, well, while we're talking about images, let's just jump into the second part of the video in which I will go through all the different images in specific detail, and I'll tell you what I think of every single one. Alright then, so part 2 of the video, let's have a look at the individual bits of art and in-game models that they showed us. Now, first of all, we have the lumber mill for the Alliance side. This is just some concept art. Overall, I think it looks really nice, lots of character, but what is really cool is when we move on to the next image, which we're going to do right now, you can see that they have actually done a pretty good job of bringing that concept art to life. Now, in this image here, we have a look at the old lumber mill and the new one. As you can see, in terms of silhouettes, they're both very different, but they still have a similar feel. Not as particularly impressive with this kind of dull background, but you can see the sort of thing they were going with. Overall, I think it does look quite nice. But yeah, let's move on to the next image, and this is the version 1 of the lumber mill, and this should give us a little bit of an idea of how the lumber mill is going to progress. You can see that version 1, like, it's got lots of character, and it does look like a nice workable area, but there's a lot of room for improvement. I also do like the way that it's kind of raised up off the ground. Those little kind of stone block sides, I think, do look quite nice, and I love the texturing. Actually, just the texturing in general and the way that they do shadows in this, they really do impress me, so I think it does look quite damn nice. And then the next image is just a quick little look between version 1 and version 2. They actually have not shown us version 3 of the lumber mill yet, so it will be nice to see that, but yeah, take it for what you will. Now, let's move on to the Mage Tower. I hope this is of use to people who are not mages, because honestly, I want one. So Mage Tower version 1, it's a bit of a tent. First of all, it's on stilts, it's really cool. I love the texturing of the actual tent itself. I think it looks really nice. And once again, that shading for the folds in the cloth, it looks, so good. Now, it does perhaps remind me a little bit of the Argent Crusade stuff, or the Argent Tournament stuff, but it certainly does look updated enough. However, things are going to get a little bit more interesting. Let's move into the Mage Tower version 2. Now, honestly, this one, it's probably going to be a bit larger than the version 1. I think it's just the scaling in this photo is perhaps a little bit odd. And sure, it does look nice and full of character, but honestly, it looks just a tad bland to me. It still does look very nice, though. Overall, it's a pretty solid building. But I think where we really get to see things move on is version 3 of the Mage Tower. It is quite similar to what we know, actually, but I think it does look really, really damn nice. And also, it's just a great progression from tent to small building to a giant fuck-off tower. That's great, honestly. Well, you're going to see, actually, what I think the most impressive part of the Mage Tower is. That's, well, in the image I just switched to, the interior. First of all, just look at the flavour of the place. The lighting is it's like dull and moody and very atmospheric. And the books themselves, actually, it's nice to see them get a little bit of detail, unlike the current blur that we're used to. But overall, it's nice. I love the candles. I love the shading of the wood. The actual wood texture itself looks very nice. Overall, I'm damn impressed. So the Mage Tower, I hope it's not just a mage thing, because I'll tell you one thing, I want one. I want one really badly. Now next, let's move on to an in-game shot, and this is of, I believe, the jewel crafting, like the little jewel crafting building. First of all, a little word about the background. It actually looks quite full and lively. I think when they first showed off the garrisons, it was basically just rough preview stuff. And sure, they look cool, but the actual areas in between the garrisons weren't really, or not the garrisons, the garrison buildings were not fully fleshed out. If you look at this particular image in the background, it does look like it's a part of a fort and a very detailed one. I like the ground grass texture, and yeah, it just looks pretty cool. But anyway, this is the level 1 jewel crafting bench, and let's ramp it up to level 2 in this image. And as you can see, a nice little visual upgrade, and this is stuff that was mainly concerning the props team. Of course, there's the actual building hut itself looks better, but things like that little cart of jewels and the various things like that, they do make it look a little bit more lively and buzzing. And when we move on to the third image here, we once again see that it's now a full-on building. And once again, the props team have done a great job. It really what your man, Jae Hyung, I think, what he said about adding the little Draenei specific things worked out so well. This feels like a Draenei alliance building, a mixture of both the core human aesthetic and the core Draenei aesthetic, and it really is interesting to see that come to life. I just like the way that the place is so crammed with detail. It seems like there's been a lot of feverish art, feverish work going on in there, and that really is a nice feeling for the building to invoke. Very happy with it. Let's move on just next to, I believe this is an enchanting building, or something like that. Honestly, I'm not particularly sure, but whatever it is, it looks kind of cool. In fact, on closer inspection, I'm pretty sure it's either enchanting or runesmithing, that being, of course, the Death Knight profession, but I'm pretty sure this is enchanting because of that weapon that's hovering in the middle. So it seems like originally the enchanting place does just start off as like a little hut or something? I'm not sure. Let's move on to the next image, which I think is just it's maybe a building in progress or something like that. And overall, yeah, it looks nice. But I'm pretty sure it is the enchanting place, because let's skip on ahead to the next image. As you can see, it's now got all the little adornments. And actually, no, this is just more of an example of the art team doing their job. So that first image I showed you of what I thought was the enchanting building, that's like the base building that was handed to the props team. Then when we move on to the second one, that's it with a few more props, and let's move on to another image, and that's it, fully decked out by the props team, so that it looks alive and feverish and just, oh, cool. So yeah, I'm really... Am I fanboying out a bit? I think I am. As much as sometimes I have an issue with LFR or one or two little Blizzard features or things, they maybe decisions I wouldn't fully agree with, I've got to say, their art team is something that I really have liked for a long time. Now as for this next image, it seems like more of a storeroom, honestly. I'm not particularly sure what it is, but it looks cool. Like, it's kind of like really full of various items and wares. And just when we move on to the next image here, it definitely looks like it's some sort of storehouse or maybe a grain house. It's got various things like that in it. No idea what it is, no idea what it does, but you know what? It looks pretty nice. And then finally, what the Horde people have all been waiting for, a look at your version 3 stables. I'm not too sure if this is the third upgrade of the stable, but it's labeled here as version 3, which maybe means it's like the third art version of the stables. Not particularly sure, but I'll tell you one thing, it looks pretty damn cool. Now one thing is that the ground texture is kind of muddy. Perhaps the overall like kind of Horde texture is going to look a little bit more muddy for the ground. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely going to say it does look like classic Horde. I love the use of the horn sticking out of it. The way that it's really just a bunch of logs that are strapped together with the tops carved into spikes. I think that just has a great feeling to it. So yeah, that's been a quick little look at all the different models. Now for my actual opinions on this post, on Garrisons, just that whole thing as a one big collective. So first of all, from an art perspective, I think you probably picked up my overall opinions. I really am a fan of what they've done. This idea of carrying in the old Elwyn and Druidar aesthetics does seem to have worked out well. I like how they've upgraded the visuals, added a lot of individuality to the buildings, and overall just given it a really nice shiny new coat of paint. But then, of course, given it some unique features and things like that, I think the interiors look fantastic. The prop team really have went all out on this one. I think you especially see that in that Draenor jewel crafting tent, and then the interior of the Mage Tower. Lots of character, lots of flavour, and I'm very happy with it. In terms of gameplay, like I've talked about the Garrisons many times before, I think that it's definitely one of the new great features that World of Warcraft's going to have. It will provide a lot of gameplay to a lot of players, which is just so damn important. It's nice that there is something there for multiple people. And if you don't particularly like group content, or maybe you're not into raids or PvP, whatever, this is going to be a wealth of things for you to do. If you think of maybe going back to get transmog gear, having fun with your garrison, pet battles, there's actually a lot there for people who just don't feel like doing the kind of main end game. It's nice that they really are diversifying things at the end. So that's very good. I still am waiting to see what things are like in terms of followers and how they're going to interact with things. Perhaps what it's going to be like in terms of gear acquisition, because we do know we'll be able to get gear via sending our followers on missions and raids and garrisons, or with the garrisons and things like that. So yeah, really overall my thoughts are very positive. Now if you want to have all of the latest Warlords of Draenor coverage and some of my thoughts, then look no further than the channel. I do 2 videos a day, so you can find stuff there. I've had a lot of great things in my Q&A recently with people just talking about garrisons. I'm pretty sure there was a Garrison-specific episode of the Q&A that came out a few days ago, which should be of interest to the people who like this video, so do go check that out. Overall, I'm very happy, and that's it for the video. Do let me know in the description, what do you think about the Garrison? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? And, well, hopefully you think it's good, because I really do like it, but if you have any feedback or constructive things, obviously, you know, let Blizzard know and let me know, because I'll talk about it in a video at some point, so that's all cool. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you want to help out the channel, you can check out my Patreon page and social media links in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.